Okay, let's just model a simple door. So I'm going to start out with a primitive object. And when we start out with primitives, we want to take advantage of the yellow handles we get with primitive objects so we can change the size of this pretty easily. So to do that, I'm just going to select the model icon and then my handles appear and I can reshape the size of this box, which is going to represent one of my doors. So I think that my door can be a little bit thinner. That looks good. So with that, I'm going to make this object editable. So I'll click the Make Editable button so that we can model with it. And now that it's editable, we can go into these different modeling modes. And the first thing that I want to do is just grab this edge and bevel it. So with this edge selected, I'm going to take my bevel tool and I'm going to make sure that it's in chamfer mode. And I'm just going to click and drag. And then we can see that that edge is being beveled. You can ignore this line that's created automatically. It's not going to affect us right now. So that's good. And maybe we'll do the other edge as well. So just bevel that out. Okay. Now what we want to do is maybe create some little raised and inset parts of our door. So we're going to need to cut through our object. So we're going to use the knife tool. So I'm going to come down here to my knife tool and make sure that visible only is deselected so we can cut through the whole object. Before I cut, I'm going to make sure that I've deselected everything. So I'm going to press the V tool to access my quick select menu and just say deselect all. And then in these viewports, I can just click and holding shift, drag a cut line, and that's going to slice my object. This is the top view, so I just sliced it from top down. But I actually wanted to cut through the side. So let's go into our right view, click, hold shift and drag, and that's the cut that I wanted. So now we can let's select this loop. So all of the whole edge all the way around the object, that's called our loop. So we'll go into the select menu and choose loop selection, and we're still in edge mode, so we can grab that whole edge, that whole loop, and then we'll use the move tool, and we can just in the viewport drag this down. And if we want it to snap to the center line here, we can go into our snapping menu and we can select edge snap. Just make sure auto snap is on and snap is enabled. And then we can choose edge snap and actually choose make sure our work plane snap is selected as well. So now when we get close to that center, just going to snap right to that center line. So that's good. Now what I want to do is create some geometry, some polygons running through the center. So I can do that just by beveling this edge. So I'll grab my bevel tool and I'm just going to pull that out nice and big. And that's good. Now we can inset these polygons and extrude them, just these ones here. So I'm going to jump into my polygon view or polygon model mode and just deselect everything. So select, deselect all, and now I'm going to grab my selection tool and just click, hold shift while you click additional polygons. Okay, that's the selection that I want. So now I'm going to use the inset tool. So here we have extrude inner, and then just click and drag, and now we're insetting these polygons. Oh. There we go, that's good. So click and drag out and then click again to confirm. Now we'll use the extrude tool right here, and we can just click and drag that in. Now we have an extrusion happening. So that's good. Now I want to maybe bevel this edge, this loop that's running through vertically. So let's go back into edge mode and let's get our loop selection tool. Just going to grab that, and maybe we will let's bevel this. So click and drag, bevel it far out here. Now let's go back to our loop selection tool, and we'll select both of these edges and we'll bevel these a second time. And now with our bevel tool we can select this edge, hold shift, select that edge. Maybe we'll select these ones down here as well. That's good. And let's bevel these edges. And now what we're getting are these little notches taken out of our door, and that looks nice. So let's just deselect our object so we can see what our mesh looks like without all of our wireframe lines here. So we can go to display and just switch the display to the regular shading view. So this looks pretty interesting. One thing that we can do is we can see that these edges here inside of our new bevel look sort of rounded, and we actually want that to be more of a hard shape. So we can control the shading inside of our Fong tag, and if we just decrease the Fong angle, you can see that we get a change in the way that our geometry is being shaded. So that looks good. Okay, very nice. So now we may want to bevel all of our edges in this object. So we can go ahead and use our bevel deformer. So right here, bevel deformer. And we can just make that a child of our object. And now we can see that all of our edges are being beveled, but we want to limit the beveling only to certain edges. We don't want these edges to be beveled on a flat surface because it will create shading errors. So we can do that by selecting the bevel object, and in our options we can select this use angle, and now we're using a threshold to decide which edges are being beveled, and that's working just like the Fong angle. So by reducing that, we're introducing more beveled edges, and we don't want that. So you just want to push this threshold up until you see the edges that you want to be beveled, and then you can decide how big of a bevel you want, and if you want additional subdivisions. So that looks pretty good. Okay, so we'll deselect so we can see what our door looks like. So that looks good. Perhaps we'll set up a couple of lights so we can see what it looks like when it's rendered with some shading. So I'm going to add an area light, and for shadows, under the General tab, I'm going to select Area Shadows. And then with our light selected, choose our Move tool, and we can just push this back, maybe move this forward a little bit, and maybe move this light up, rotate it down using the rotation tool. Okay, and so then we can maybe duplicate this light. So using the Move tool and holding Command, we can duplicate the light. And so let's just move that over. Grab our rotation tool, and then we want to rotate this 180 degrees. So we will actually switch the coordinate mode to world mode so that we can just rotate this around. We'll select our other light and just rotate it toward our object. And then maybe we will turn down the intensity of one of these lights so that we can see the form of our shape. So that looks good. So now if we hit render, we can get a sense of what our door is looking like. This looks nice. Okay. So that's great. Now we can, let's name our cube door. And we can actually use a symmetry object. And if we put our door inside of our symmetry object and then move our door, so we'll select this model mode icon, choose our move tool, and if we slide our door, we see no change. If we slide it up and down, we also see no change. But if we slide it side to side, we can see that we actually have our door being cloned in symmetry, which is good. We just need to change the plane that we're using symmetry for this door. So this is also a quick way to duplicate our geometry. If we actually like the two sides of our door, we could go and select symmetry, right click and say current state to object, and then that duplicates our geometry, and now we have an object that actually has that additional geometry on the back side. So that's a good way to go. We can just pull this new object outside of this null that was automatically created. We can delete that null. I can delete my original object here, or I can place it into an extra null. Turn off the stop lights and just place our old object in there. So now it's not being viewed or rendered. Now we can work with our new piece of geometry. So we can go ahead and put this inside of a symmetry object again. And this time we want to change the symmetry plane to Y and X. Here it is, X, Y. Now when we grab our door, we select this model mode here. And now when we move it side to side, we have a nice duplicate of our door. And at a later stage when we animate this, to animate the opening and closing of our door, we can keep it in this symmetry object and really only animate one side of our door. And that will be convenient for us at a later time. Great. So now if we render our door, we can see that we have a nice door here, and now we can come in and add additional pieces that we may animate with later. I don't want you to be too concerned with the animation stage here. We can always add more details that we will animate with at a later stage. But this is good. So we also need to be animating, or rather modeling, another set of doors. So you may duplicate this and maybe use it as a starting point to start to build a different set of doors, or you may start again with a new primitive object. But right away, we have a nice thing going here for us. And the only tools that we really touched here are the bevel tool, the extrude tool, the extrude inner or inset tool, the knife tool, and we added a bevel deformer, and then used the symmetry object to help us here. Great. So just with what we've covered here, you should be able to create a lot of variation in your doors, and this should get you rolling.